I guess it is quite hard to see what they're actually on about, but certainly inequality seems to be one of their big messages, that, you know, the 99% don't own the resources and wealth in the West, and the 1% are too greedy. You know, do you have any sympathy with that sort of view?
Yes, it's quite a successful sort of catchy.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, 8 seconds is a long time for a soundbite, and they've got it down to 2 numbers. 99%.
So that's too crude, you think? That's too crude a sort of way of explaining distribution of wealth.
Well, I think it's turning out to be a very successful way of capturing a complex issue. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Oh, it's no doubt a complex issue, but still, there's some quite strong sort of, I guess, principles or analytical sort of frameworks about how we run the world embodied in that. And it seems to me that issues of inequality seem to be becoming political issues throughout the West, and in this election campaign, lots of people are raising it. So, you know,
and I think it's what's made it. I mean, there's always been issues about inequality. It's one of the fundamental debates of political philosophy and the political economy. But
it's heightened at the moment.
Going right back to Aristotle. Yeah. So there's nothing new about that. I think the difference is the sense that people are benefiting that the losses are being socialised.
Yeah.
Okay, profits are being individualised and losses are being socialised, and because actually I think a lot less people are concerned. If you take a big risk and you do well, that's fine. You took a big risk. That's part of our open society. But if you take a big risk and it goes badly, and I've got to pay for it,
right?
Which makes me poorer. While you get a lot richer.
So you're essentially saying that the free market isn't free market enough, and that it's there's too many distortions making the rich richer, when if you had a better free market, there would be better division of wealth.
Well, I mean, the free market's sort of a bit of a loaded...
Yeah, sure.
Bit of a loaded term. I'd more think about do you face the consequences of your actions? And it's fair enough, I think, for people who are going to work every day. Their hourly rates hasn't changed much in a long time. And then suddenly they're landed with a bill, and in this case a generational bill, to pay for someone who took a huge risk in a system that should have stopped that happening. So that's exacerbated the sense of inequality. But the underlying issues about inequality are, you know, quite legitimate political debates. And we're always walking a fine line when you're making policy. I mean, ultimately, policymakers reflect the society, not the other way around. And it's a fine line between the benefits of an open, mobile society, on the one hand, but the degree of buy-in to the common enterprise that you need in order to support that.
Sure.
And too much inequality means people don't buy into it.
That's right. But I guess, for a moment, forgetting about, you know, how difficult it is to ameliorate inequality, just as an end goal, you know, do you think we need to have a much more equal society, or is a bit of inequality a good thing, or, you know, what's your personal...
Well, I take a pretty practical approach to it, and that is societies that have tried to achieve equality always end up with coercive solutions.
Sure.
Okay, and coercive solutions always end up with lots of dead people, and critics being locked up. I mean, what we found is that liberal capitalism gets a reasonable balance, that political liberalism and economic liberalism together, where the collective can police the rules a bit, so that you don't get massive inequality. So I don't see it as an end in itself, no. I mean, some people do, to have equality, total equality. Others, I'm one of those who don't, partly because the utopianism that goes with that has turned out to be dangerous and deadly.
Right.
Sorry. Can I just say...
Sorry, just introduce you. This is Finn, an honours student in the politics department, and he's monitoring the Twitter sphere and bringing in some supplementary questions.
This is just my own question on that whole issue. If you were asked that question in an electorate, you know, maybe a poorer electorate, maybe South Dunedin or South Auckland, is that the same answer that you'd give? I mean, I suppose what I'm saying is that it's a very theoretical response to the issue of inequality, and there are a lot of good points about different forms of society. But how would you respond to that question if somebody came up to you at a supermarket and said, I'm struggling to pay for my, you know, everyday items?
Well, that happens most days, most hours and most days, particularly in election campaigns. So it's not as if we don't get to answer that question. And I think there's the combination of, and this is, I think we've demonstrated over the last few years through the pressures of a recession, a combination of protecting the safety net, protecting the most vulnerable, so people know there's a floor. And even though our tax revenue dropped away, we've maintained the big upsurge in income support that occurred sort of from 2005 onwards, kept that in place. So people haven't felt threatened that the rug was going to be pulled out from under them. So they've got a floor there. And then the issue, and that's at a level which by kind of common consensus is about right, whether it's national superannuation or working for families or interest-free student loans. There's a bit less consensus about that. And then the question is mobility, because what I find in those communities, and actually we've got them all around the place. I mean, my electorate down south here is in the bottom third for per capita incomes, seen as a wealthy farming electorate, but actually it's a very small proportion of the population is farming. A lot of the rest of it is casual, seasonal work, and people on benefits because it's cheap living, cheaper housing. So you've got the floor there, and then you need mobility. And I find in those communities it's the focus on mobility that actually gives them some sense of aspiration. So they want to know that their kids can get a decent education so that by the time they get to the end of secondary school, they've got some feasible choices about earning an income better than their parents earned, and working less hours than their parents had to work.
But are you satisfied that we have enough social mobility in New Zealand?
I don't think we have enough yet, but I think it's the right way to approach the problem of inequality. And when I say we don't have enough, you've got sections of the population who get caught in the welfare trap, and I don't mean that in the sense that that's what they want. It's just it's very difficult to move out of it. But actually, when you look at a cohort over time, we have reasonable degrees of mobility, higher than other countries.
Okay. I noticed on the Twitter stream we've got a very good question from Holly Walker. She says, does Bill English accept the spirit level thesis that more equal societies do better across the board?
No, not necessarily. I mean, I think the book raises a pretty interesting proposition. But it's not difficult to, even with the countries he uses, to actually construct a different index that shows a different result. So it's a fair enough debate. So he's made an assertion. I think over time that will get tested. Of course, the kind of societies that this is the interesting thing about the global financial crisis and the European wrangling going on at the moment, is that the kind of system that the book asserts achieves the right level is the very system that is now in the process of crumbling at the edges. Because what we're finding is that may well turn out to be unsustainable. And of course that process, if you're sitting in Greece, the process of unwinding is pretty rugged, and you're getting real inequality in those countries.
So one thing's going to get worse in the next 3 years, regardless perhaps if Labour or National are in government, with all the sort of belt tightening that's going to have to occur to get the deficit more back into surplus. I mean, you're going to have to cut some core public service stuff, aren't you? How bad is it going to be?
Well, that depends a bit. I think there's different ways of going about that task, and we've resisted the temptation to take the short-term view, which was revenue drop, let's run in and grab some savings out of all these public services. Approach. Well, you can call it what you like, but that's one version, and the different governments in New Zealand have had a crack at that. The other is to take a more balanced and considered approach, which we've taken, which is to say, okay, in a recession, we'll keep borrowing, and we have. Last year we borrowed more money than any New Zealand government ever has, $20 billion, to keep the system going, while it changes culture and changes focus. So the public service has now had time to understand the world's different than it was for the last 10 or 15 years, quite different from their point of view. They need to change what they focus on, they need to change their skill sets,
sure.
They need to get used to constraint, they need to get used to much tighter prioritising. And over the next 3 years, now that they're ready, to execute a difficult job, which is maintain services, but at lower cost. I'm quite hopeful, actually, with the resilience I've seen from the public service, that we'll be able to achieve that.
Now, I've got some other questions about the public service, but we've got a question in the audience from Andrew, maybe about the economy.
So my question is not really about economics, like it's more into politics. Like this year with those developments within the ACT party, like Rodney Hyde being replaced by Don Brash, but there's some speculation that National had a part in it. Like, how do you respond to those allegations or theories?
The answer to that is no. It's a big enough job running your own party without trying to run someone else's.
Okay, another question at the back here.
I just want to ask if National wants to continue the trend of what Labour's done with advancing cultural debate in New Zealand about the divisions between Pākehā and Māori society.
Oh, well, I've got quite a different view about that. I think Labour didn't do much to advance cultural debate because they have a fundamentally patronising attitude about Māori as a block of reliable voters who depend on the welfare system and therefore should support the Labour Party. And what we found is that by going into coalition or support arrangements with the Māori Party, that level of debate, certainly with the Crown, has opened up, and in a much more positive, progressive way, we were actually achieving things because, as I think John Key said at the time we made the agreement, it's based on respect, not agreement. And it has actually historically been easier for the National Party to deal with Māori on a basis of equivalence. In fact, in many ways, the Māori community is quite conservative. It's hierarchical, it's family orientated. The whole revival of Māoridom is in many ways a conservative event because they're trying to rebuild what they had in their constitutional role, but also their economic and social role. So I think that's moved ahead. And like in the last 3 years, my experience of it, and I spent a lot of time on Maori-related issues, both treaty settlement and general policy issues, we're finding a rapidly increasing proportion of Maori opinion leaders and leadership focused on how to get ahead rather than on how to continue this what was previously the symbiotic relationship with government and government programs.
Okay. Getting back to the economy, sorry to sound like a... but you love the economy, so let's talk more about that.
I like that style. The cultural debates are just as tricky.
And just
they're
as
trickier, actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But